welcome all of you, and I thank the library for hosting me tonight to share with you some of what I've done over the years. That intro pretty much covered my whole talk, but I'll try to augment it with a few other stories and a few pictures as well as we go along. So let us get started. Photographs and stories that are told with words, and tell you some stories about making photographs and also writing words. And that little opener, that little lamp, it's about this tall, was actually a wedding gift to my grandmother around the turn of the century, 1900 century. And it's a storyteller's lamp, and I've found that over life I've become a storyteller in different media, whether it's with words or with pictures and films, and that's what I want to share with you tonight. But specifically, I wanted to talk about being a National Geographic photographer who shoots in Groton, and I'm going to tell you how that all came about and why, to me, it's quite a fascinating and interesting experience and story. And first off, I want to go back in time to around 1964. And when I was 12 or so, my mom gave me a camera. I was not very athletic, and she thought a camera, she liked to take pictures. My older brother liked to take pictures. She thought a camera might be something that would encourage me to explore my world and to share it with people, which is what photography is all about. And so we set up a little dark room at home, and I would go out and take pictures of pretty much anything and everything. And one day, again around 1964, we lived down on Parkway North, and at the corner of Montauk Ave and Lower Boulevard, there was a fire in the house. So I ran out with my camera, and I took some pictures of the action there. And this particular picture down at the bottom seemed to strike me and my mom as being a nice little representation of the scene. So I went back home, and in the darkroom, I got the negative out and put it in the enlarger. That's what you did back then. And I made a print of it. And my mom, if you knew my mom Fuzzy, you would know that she was not shy about things, went to the Day and said, my son took this picture and maybe you ought to publish it. And they did. So that's my very first published picture, 1964. And I'm not good at math, but it was a long time ago. And I think it does kind of capture a moment in life, which was kind of what photography is really all about. Then when I got to college, I never took a photo course, really an instructional course in my life. I just fooled around teaching myself how to take pictures and found a willing professor who would sign off on my projects. And I would stay out of his way, he'd stay out of mine. At the end of the term, I'd show him what I did and he'd give me a grade. And it's a story where a photographer came in and showed a little 2-projector slideshow, and I was totally mesmerized by it. It was just one picture dissolving into another set to music about Boston. And it was love at first sight, and it changed my life. And I never looked back. I started making slideshows in college, and you'll see, professionally for the next 50 or 60 years. And I don't know who the photographer was, but it was one of those moments where your life just crystallizes. And I never became an athlete, I never became an astronaut or a scientist or anything else. I became a photographer and media producer, and it all started that night in that class. So what I did is I decided I would make a slideshow, and over the Thanksgiving holiday, I came back to New London and started photographing Union Railroad Station, which at the time was kind of beat up and cruddy, but had a lot of character, and for a photographer, it was wonderful. So I started to make pictures there, not just over Thanksgiving, but over the next few months whenever I visited. And it was my first experience with trying to document not just one picture, but a sequence of pictures that would tell the story of a place. In this case, Union Railroad Station, people waiting there, people coming, people going, the trains. The place had its own life, it had its own rhythm. And I shot it obviously in black and white. And I put together a little, I don't know, 7 or 8 minute slideshow with 2 projectors, and I was hooked. It taught me to go to some place and look at it closely, to see what it had to offer, because photography is not really what you want, it's what you get. You can't plan life, you can't plan, I mean, unless you're in a studio, but that's not most of what I do. You can't plan how things are going to unfold, how the light's going to be, how people or animals are going to act. You respond to it, and you try to do the best to get it onto film. Well, my path eventually led me to, as Ann mentioned, Time Life in New York, where I worked for about a year making film strips into, guys got much darker hair, but it is me. They had 2 book series, Nature and Anthropology, and I helped turn those into film strips, which some of you may remember. Pretty crude technology, but it gave me experience with writing scripts and taking pictures and dealing with soundtracks and putting it all together. A professor of mine at college, the guy who would sign off on my train station kind of projects, had a project in Boston that he needed a slideshow made for the Boston Aquarium. They had a area at the top and they wanted something to screen up there. So I went back to Boston. My time at Time Life was pretty much done. And I started to work as Gipstein Multimedia, which was basically me and my apartment. And had my own business. Eventually I got real and got an office in Copley Square with a nice studio, and I had an assistant, and got to be a little more professional because I was competing with a lot of big professional companies, and I had to not like move my laundry aside from a chair when the client came in and shoo away the cat to show my work. It just didn't go so well. So anyhow, I got a nice office in Boston, and I did specialize in doing orientation shows for museums, for doing documentary work. I did some corporate work for sure, but it helped pay the bills because the nonprofits' budgets were tiny, which actually turned out to be good. I did shows on really shoestring budgets. And I think almost any artist will tell you that limitations are the best thing that can happen to you because it makes you stretch creatively. When you have all the resources you want and all the money you have, yes, you can do good things, but you don't have to stretch as much. And when you have almost nothing, you really have to be creative and innovative to pull it off. And believe me, my budgets were tiny. One time I had to give one of my clients a slide projector so he could run the damn show. That's pretty pathetic. But it was slow going. I would send my financials to my dad, who had his accountant do his taxes, and one day he called me and said, Todd, you're supposed to take in more money than you spend. That was my business degree. That took a while, but eventually the business kind of got rolling. And while I did a lot of work up in Boston, as I said, for museums in the whole New England area and corporations, I also, over the years, have done shows about places and institutions here in New London. So it was nice to come back here and rediscover where I grew up anew with the eye of a documentary producer. And we're going to see some of this as we go along. Well, again, let's go back in time. And now we're at about 1987, and National Geographic comes into my life. Right out of college, through a family friend, I went and showed my work to National Geographic, and they weren't interested at all. They were doing TV, they saw these nice slow slideshows, and they said, yeah, not enough action, nice kid, good luck, have a good life. They weren't interested. 13 years later, however, they had seen some of my projects in international festivals where I'd done quite well with screenings and awards. And they saw one particular show that really caught their eye. And they called me out of the blue and said, would you like to do a show about geography for us? And by show, I mean slideshow. Well, it was kind of surprising, but they said no one in this building can figure out how to do this because the writers of the magazine don't know AV, and the writers for TV don't know AV and still pictures. No one here can seem to do this. We have a studio, and we love your work. Would you come and do it? So I did a show for them called Voyage of Discovery, which amazingly, all these years later, this was 1987, I occasionally get an email from someone in a college saying, we're still using that show, which is quite amazing to me, actually. So I did that show for them. It was very successful. It went all over the world to help teach geography what it was really all about and get people inspired by it. And then, being at the right place at the right time, the Geographic celebrated its 100th anniversary in 1988. And they asked me to do media for that evening, which was a stellar evening in Washington, D.C. The president was there. They had 1,000 distinguished guests. The pressure was on. I had to do modules about their awardees, Jane Goodall, Jacques Cousteau, Robert Ballard, Richard Leakey, et cetera, do a little profile of each of them, and then a big celebration of the history of Geographic. So the pressure was on to deliver the biggest event of my career for a huge client in front of an amazing audience. I was never so happy as when the lights came on at the end of that evening and nobody had been hurt, no slides had jammed in the projector, and I could finally have a glass of wine. It was a very intense evening, but all went well. And I started to do more shows for them, and then about a year later they said, would you like to come down here and work full time to be the director of multi-image and make shows for us, because someone who was doing it was retiring. You don't say no to National Geographic, so I said yes. So I liquidated my business and moved down to Washington, D.C., and they set me up with a whole bunch of studios and a lot of fun gear and kind of let me have at it. And these are some of the projects that I've worked on over the years, and many more, but some of them for National Geographic. And I had the weirdest and most wonderful job there is no one was telling me what to do. They'd say, make a show about the oceans. And I'd say, like what? And they'd say, well, whatever. You know what we're all about. We'll tell you if we don't like it. Or make a show about photography. Just like one word, photography, exploration. And I'd go off and write my scripts and do my shows and spend their money. And I'm proud to say over the years, they hardly made any changes in them. So apparently I understood what they were all about, and they gave me complete creative freedom, which is very unique at any place, including Geographic, where there's committees and editors and lots of furrowed brows as things are designed and made. For some reason, they just let me do my thing. So those are some of the shows I did. And I worked out of the headquarters in National Geographic down in Washington, D.C. It's very near the White House. I had a nice office and suite of studios and an assistant here and there when I needed them. And that was headquarters where I worked. My other office was this. The world. National Geographic's mission is the world and all that's in it, and they don't kid around. So my projects did take me all over the world. I was my own photographer on most of the shows. Sometimes I used pictures from the archives. Sometimes I was profiling another photographer. But by and large, I went out and shot the assignments myself. And so I would hop on an airplane and go somewhere to do a project. And I was not one of the photographers who could spend a year waiting for the perfect sunrise or for the perfect animal moment. I had to hit the ground running and keep going and get my work done in a couple of weeks and get back and then start to put it all together as a slideshow. My mom, Fuzzy, ran Lyman Allen museum trips all over the world and gave lectures on art, and I would go along on these to take pictures so she would have pictures to show. And we'd get to say, I don't know, Notre Dame Cathedral. And she'd say, as we got off the bus, I need exteriors, I need all the statues, get the stained glass, some nice details, and some people milling about, and I'll see you on the bus in a half hour. That was very good training. I am not the best National Geographic photographer who's ever been, but I am the fastest. And that comes in very handy in a lot of aspects of life when you travel where you don't have 3 weeks to get the perfect shot. And on these expedition ships I go on, it's kind of similar. You get off the Zodiac boat or you go ashore on a hike and you've got a couple hours ashore and I'm expected to get pictures to show the guests and to show photography. So I work very, very quickly, and I'm also trying to teach people photography along the way. So anyhow, my job has taken me many different places and many different types of environments over the years. I've never had much in the way of gear, just whatever I could fit over my shoulder. And I've gone along with all the technology that's changed. I really don't like technology, but I love the results it can give me. So I got to travel quite a bit around the world on National Geographic's dime. And I'll show you a little gallery of some of just the places I've been and the pictures I've taken, and tell you that when you go out and shoot, it's not about the equipment at all. I could care less what camera I'm using, really. It's all about the person behind the camera. The photographer makes the picture, and all the picture is how you react to something that's caught your attention because it's compelling, it's beautiful, it's disturbing, it's mysterious, whatever the case may be. And when you're telling a story, you do have to get a sequence of pictures that tells the story. But individual pictures should tell a story. They should be pleasing. I try to go out and shoot with my mind, my eye, and my heart. My mind thinking about what I'm shooting, what the context is, if it's a story, its meaning in history or whatever. with my eye, try to get a picture that is visually striking, that's simple, that will grab you and compel you to look at it. And with my heart, with something that connects to you on some emotional level. Again, it can be wonder, it can be beauty, it can be disturbing, whatever the case may be. That's what you go out there and shoot with. Yeah, you have a camera, but it's your mind, your eye, and your heart is what really makes photographs. And as you can see from these, I'm a real generalist. I've shot just about every type of photography there is, with the exception of hard news or war. That's just not my beat. I've never had clients who did it, and I've never had a call to do it. I admire and respect those people. However, when they're shooting with bullets, I'm shooting with film. It's not a good dynamic. But I've shot pretty much everything else, from the sky, underwater, a lot of cultural stuff, a lot of history. And photographing people is really my favorite. Those interactions with strangers around the world. You don't always speak the language, but you grab the little moments of their lives. And you just have to look closely at your environment and what's happening. That's the deal of being a photographer, is looking closely and immersing yourself in the moment. People say, oh, taking pictures is a distraction. It can be. But I argue that all these pictures never would have happened if I didn't have a camera and I wasn't immersing myself in the moment and trying to talk to a stranger, going down an alley and seeing what's there. You're an explorer, you're curious. So to me, it roots me more in the experience trying to take pictures than it does to pull me out. So I've always been grateful for photography as something that like a compass, draws me to experiences in unique places. One of my favorite pictures, a very shy girl in Fiji, a kind of different kind of portrait. You can see her smile even though she's trying to be shy and coy. So these are wonderful memories, and they all come back to me, and I remember the moment when I took them. But hopefully when you see them, not connected at all to the experience, they still have value to you as something you think about, something you enjoy looking at, and hopefully something you will feel. So all these pictures ended up, the best of them, in a little slide mount, in a slide tray, coordinated with sound with computers to music and voices. And I was lucky to work with a guy named Arkley King, who was a genius with sound and soundtracks, and we collaborated for 25 years, about the only person I actually could ever collaborate with, except for my wife. And he taught me a whole lot about sound and went in on a lot of projects just for the heck of it, no pay, just, yeah, let's do this. It's an interesting thing. So I was very blessed to have him as a sound engineer and as a best friend. So all these pictures, you know, they come back and they end up in slide trays, they end up prints on the walls, in books, in the library of National Geographic, and that was kind of a bit of my career there. Well, then we go back into the time machine again, and we move forward to 2005. And by then, the world of media had really changed. Digital had come along, the internet had come along, and I didn't really have to be at National Geographic headquarters anymore. I could do the work I did, which was more and more digital and based in computers, pretty much anywhere. And in Washington, we lived outside of Washington and had a little patio that looked out on a parking lot. And we saw a house for sale on Eastern Point. And 2 days later, we bought it, and 2 months later, we were living here. And I set up my studio, and we kept going. And I knew nothing really about Eastern Point in Groton, this area. I grew up in New London, kind of a little past that lighthouse, inland a little bit. I don't know if I'd ever been over here much. I think we came over to eat at a restaurant or two over the years. And when Marcia and I first came to look at our house, it was like, whoa, where did this neighborhood come from? This is paradise, it's beautiful. And it was, as I said, a no-brainer. And it didn't take long living here to realize that I could make really interesting pictures here as well, that this was a very photogenic area. There's just a lot of beauty, and these are all just in our neighborhood and area. And I love to go out and take pictures, so I started to go out and take pictures. And you know, the atmospheres and the details and the nature and everything you have to offer here, the maritime world, and you know, performances in the park or whatever, it's a wonderful place to take pictures. There are good pictures everywhere, anywhere. You just have to find them. And it's not easy because we often think, well, this is where I live. It's not very exotic. Let me go to Fiji or Antarctica or Bora Bora or something. But you know, you take someone from Bora Bora, Fiji, and you bring them to Groton, they'll think it's exotic. It's all relative. And we often, I think, are blinded by the familiarity of where we live and overlook the beauty we have. This is just looking out, that last two shots, from our patio at the house across the street with lightning and incredible clouds. And over the years, Marcia and I would take this very magical walk from our house to the Avery Point Lighthouse there. And, you know, it's got so much. It's got views of the ocean, and it's got memorial bricks, and it's got lighthouses and ponds and nature. I mean, it's just chock full sculpture gardens of amazing things. So we'd take this walk, and I would take the occasional picture. And then we got involved around 2003 or 4 with media festivals in Italy, the Fantasia being one, which means fantasy of slides. And it was in this charming hill town in Oslo, Italy, where we would go and meet other media producers from around the world, and we showed artsy shows and experimental shows, and, you know, not corporate commercial work, but people who just loved art and photography. Some of them were postmen, some of them were, you know, drafting people or tax collectors, but they loved photography too, and they shared the work, and the public would come and we'd project on the buildings, and it was a whole, you know, 5-day festival in this beautiful little hill town in very northern Italy, about an hour from Venice. And it was just a magical place. And we got to know the Italians, and we got to know these festivals. There was another one in Gemona, Immagino, the imagination of Gemona, the town. And it's also in the hills of northern Italy, about an hour or so from Venice. And they would do it every other year. So one year it was Fantasia, and then the next year was Gemona. And I'd always try to put together a show for the festival. One night they did an evening of my work for Geographic, which was more artsy and documentary than commercial for sure. But I would always try to come up with ideas to show them something that I was working on and experimenting with. Around 2011, Fuji came out with this camera, this very interesting retro digital camera. And when I got it, it had its flaws, but I liked it, I think, because it reminded me of that very first camera that my mother had given me. And I started to play with it and shoot with it, and I won't get into all the technical reasons, but it allowed you to look through the viewfinder and see the world in black and white, which I'd never been able to do. And shooting black and white is very different than shooting color. And it was such a eureka moment. It's like, wow, I can actually see the world in black and white. I can compose. I don't have to make a print or go to the computer and dial out the color and try to imagine all that. I could look at it, compose, and shoot in black and white. And it brought me back to my early days shooting. This was a picture I took in 1970 of a classmate, no, even earlier, 1967, I think, of a classmate sitting in a library with the sunlight dappling on him. And if there's ever a picture that's chiaroscuro, light and shadow, this is it. And it brought me back to those days of shooting in black and white. And more as we traveled, I started to shoot again in black and white. I mean, I still shot color, I liked it, but I rediscovered black and white, which has a different feel. It's kind of harkens back to the earlier days of photography before there was color. Color can be distracting, black and white isn't. It abstracts things in a way that color doesn't. It's not as real, so abstracts and shapes and graphic textures really stand out in black and white. And at places like Antarctica, which are basically black and white, I've been there 5 times, and I've shot a lot of black and white. Penguins are black and white. Some places are just naturals for shooting it, and Antarctica being one, but almost any place, if you approach it in a certain way in black and white, it really looks beautiful. And I got enamored with it, and I thought as the festival came up in 2012, 2013, well, what could I do for the festival? So I decided to combine the lovely walk that we had to orient you a little bit. Here's my house at the top, the Shenandoah Golf Course, Eastern Point Beach, Yukon, etc. And I decided that I would impose myself with some limitations. I would walk, basically it's 1 mile from our house to the Avery Point Lighthouse. And that was the route I took. Occasionally, I would go around Project Oceanology in Yukon, but basically that was the route. And I didn't go far from the sidewalk and the path, maybe 50 feet on either side. I was determined to keep it to a very limiting thing in distance. I also decided that I would do it for 1 year, so it was limited somewhat in time. It wouldn't be just open-ended. And I would use the Fuji camera to shoot with, and it has 1 lens on it. You can't change that lens. It's 35 millimeter. So my limitations were time, 1 year, space, 1 mile, and lens, 1 35 millimeter lens. I didn't go out every day. I went out when I felt like it. and that included on some heavy blizzard days. And having been in Antarctica, I didn't mind that. I had the gear. So I went out when the light looked good, when the mood was good, and when I felt like taking a walk with the camera. And it was amazing that you could take the same walk over and over and over and always find new things. We all have this blindness of familiarity where we live, and you know, your own house, you don't even see the pictures on the walls after a while. But if you can break through that and look at things with a fresh eye, kind of hit yourself in the side of the head, you'll start to see all sorts of things that you hadn't seen before. And that was part of the exercise of this, was to take someplace very, very familiar and look at it with fresh eyes, because I had a project to do, and I'm a photographer, and that's how we're supposed to look at things. It was also a nice assignment because no jet lag, no packing, none of that. I would walk out the front door and I was where I wanted to shoot. And it was, turns out, I hope you'll agree, a very amazing place to shoot. So what I'm going to show you, this project ended up with an exhibit at the Fontadilla Media Festival in 2013. I had an exhibit of my photographs in a gallery there. We made prints of them, and it was shown there as part of the festival. They had all sorts of art galleries and things around town, and they would have exhibits from people involved with it. And I'm going to show you the show as well. It's about 14 minutes of how I saw our area, especially Eastern Point, Avery Point, in black and white with that one lens, that one camera for that 1 year. So if we can take the lights off me and focus your attention on the screen, let's take a journey through our backyard. Thank you. I think we do live in a pretty extraordinary place, really. I've been lucky, Marcia and I have been lucky to travel all over the world, and we've never found a place we'd rather live than Groton. So it's a magical place. The show, let's see, where is it? You can see it on YouTube. I have a channel, X100 is on there, and it's at my website as well if you want to watch it again or share it. And at this point, it's got close to 90,000 views. And what I found interesting over the years that's been up there is that it inspired a lot of photographers to do the exact same thing all over the world. There are people in Europe, there are people in Asia, there are people in Africa who said, I saw this film and I think, you know, I should do the same. I don't have to, I'd like to travel, but if I can't, I need to rediscover where I live and what it offers, what's unique, what's beautiful there. And that made me feel really good to inspire other people to do something to get more out of where they live and not just have the wanderlust that, oh, I wish I could be over the horizon someplace better. Where you are is the best place to be, and there are good pictures absolutely everywhere. And even if you don't pick up a camera, what I hope this film will do for people, and I know it has, is make them just look closer and feel more about where they live. And not just take it for granted and overcome, as I said earlier, that blindness of familiarity that we all have. There's just extraordinary things, and if you take a morning walk, just look a little closer and you might discover all sorts of wonderful things that are there all the time and that happen very quickly and are gone. And that's what life is, and certainly that's what photography is. So this whole maritime environment we live in is certainly a part of my work and a part of my life, always has been. I love the water. I love being out on it. And now I'm going to turn to a little bit of the maritime history, specifically some of the lighthouses, which have been a factor in my life. There are three major ones here. The New London Harbor Light, built first in 1761, then Ledge Light much later in 1909, and Race Rock in 1872. And they're all very different, as you know. They're extraordinary places. Ledge Lighthouse, which is what I want to focus on a bit, was manned by the Coast Guard. Before that, the Lighthouse Board, but the Coast Guard until they automated it in 1987. At that point, the keepers left and the New London Ledge Lighthouse Foundation was created to become stewards of the lighthouse and to take care of it. And over the years, they did a little bit here and there, but it kind of fell into disrepair. Marcia and I, through Jim Streeter, and we're not sure if we want to thank him for this or not, but got us on the board of the Ledge Light Foundation. And in 2009, it was going to celebrate its 100th anniversary, and we asked the board what they were going to do, and they had no plans. So Marcia, I said, well, that's no good. So we decided we would put on a birthday party, a centennial gala for it, like I'd done for National Geographic. And so we planned this big event, and we had about 220 people came to Port and Starboard over at Ocean Beach, and it was really quite an amazing night. I made a documentary film about the lighthouse. We had, you know, music and speakers and awards, the whole bit, and it really was a wonderful celebration. And as part of that, big mouth that I am, I said, and you know what we're going to do is we're going to create a museum inside the lighthouse, and we're going to run tours to it. And they were, oh, that's great. And we got home, and I said, well, maybe we ought to do it, because we promised it, we raised some money. So be careful what you promise. That started about a decade-long immersion in the lighthouse. This was all volunteer, with Marcia and I heading the foundation to do serious preservation work on it and to do all that we had promised at the gala. So over the next few years, we got all sorts of people to go out there, crews of submarines, lighthouse fanatics, just local people who wanted to lend a hand for this very treasured, revered local landmark that was needing a lot of work. Boy, did it need a lot of work. You know, you close the door in October, November, and you open up in March, and anyone who owns a home knows that you got to keep maintenance going. And if no one's touching it for those months out in the middle of the ocean with storms and ice and all that, it takes a beating, and it did take a beating. So we got a lot of people out. As I said, crews of sub came out, all sorts of people. We did this all on a very limited budget. Project O would drop us off. We'd work all day and they'd pick us up. So God forbid you forgot a paintbrush. You couldn't go off to Home Depot to pick it up. So you really had to plan it carefully and get the boat and get the weather and get everything to work. But we made progress, and this room sort of already been a little work done on it. Ended up being this room in the museum. This really beat up room became our navigation room with charts and information about navigation. And then when it was presentable, and after the Coast Guard repairs the stairway that leads up from the water level up to it, we said, okay, time to do the tours. There had been a little bit of tours intermittently, but nothing really official or whatever. So we worked with Project Oceanology, who had been taking kids out there, and was obviously good access to it and helped us considerably with the restoration work, bringing crews and people out there. And we had tours that, at the height of it over the years, we'd bring 50 people out 2 or 3 times a week. And it was a tour of the lighthouse itself, you'll see lots of exhibits. We had a theater, an orientation film that 17 people, they'd come in, they'd watch the thing. We had docents who would lead them around. You could go throughout the entire lighthouse, except for the Coast Guard battery room. We had panels on the walls that I designed and created all over the different rooms and the hallways that told you the history of the lighthouse. We had the original blueprints, one of our helpers, John Mazzucci, how it was built. A lot of information panels there, and our docents got very knowledgeable at telling the stories of it. One year, a keeper who had been there contacted us, sent me a shoebox full of pictures, which we scanned and made 2 exhibits of life on the lighthouse as seen by a keeper back in 58 and 59. I got everything from little dogs they had to playing, Elvis stuff and chipping ice, you name it. And it was so wonderful and gratifying to be on a tour and see people looking at these panels and exhibits in these rooms and realizing that room looked like this a year or so earlier. So it was an incredible project. It's ongoing, and it always needs work. But here's Marcia's family enjoying the view from the top of the light tower. And we had a gift shop as well. And Marcia ran the gift shop. We designed our own merchandise. And we sold all sorts of stuff at the gift shop, because people love to get that, exit through the gift shop when you're at a museum. We put benches, memorial benches on the outside so people could sit and enjoy the view, best view in town. We had a flag raising ceremony. We gave flags to families of veterans who'd been, whatever. We really had quite the operation going. And we talked about the hurricane of 1938, where the waves were allegedly breaking over the top of the building. And of course, you couldn't have Ledge Light in a museum about it without talking about the ghost, Ernie, the keeper who is said to have killed himself after his wife ran off with the captain of one of the ferries. So Ernie had his own room, which we decorated to kind of look like a lighthouse keeper's room. We had a very spooky, creepy figure of Ernie there, and the light would come on when you walked in the room, and he was a very popular attraction. So we had Ernie, as I said, a really spooky figure there. And to help in all this, since I'm a writer, I wrote a novel, a historical fiction novel, In the Shadow of the Light, that's kind of about Ernie and the lighthouse and a guy who goes out there trying to investigate it, and things don't go so well for him. And it was a book that I wrote that we could sell in the gift shop because people wanted to know more about the lighthouse. It's historical fiction. There was a lot of real history in it, a lot of fiction too. And there were things in the book that we had kind of a treasure hunt. So as you walked around the lighthouse, there were 5 or 6 clues you could look for that were things in the book. And if you look closely enough, you would find them. So it all dovetailed. The lighthouse fed into the book fed into the lighthouse. So I'm going to show you this film now called Dream of the Lights that talks about Race Rock. It talks about Ledge Light. It features at one point Charlie Ferguson, a wonderful artist who lived out on Fisher's Island and did a whole series of pictures, paintings, watercolors about Race Rock. And you're going to see a gallery of his pictures woven into this film. It's not narrated, it's just to give you impressions of our maritime environment around the lighthouses. So it's an homage to the 3 lights and to the keepers who lived there. And also embedded in it, you'll see this very strange sequence about Ledge Light, which was actually a trailer or parts of the trailer for my book that I had come. So you'll see some very spooky stuff and some ghosts and some weird stuff. And that was all came out of the book in an attempt to connect the book to the lighthouse and this film. This film, too, went to Fontadilla in Italy. I wanted to show them not just Eastern Point, but some of the wonderful and unique lighthouse world we have around us, as well as the maritime world of the submarines and the sailboats and all of that goes by on the river that we may or might not always take notice of. So we'll watch this film called Dream of the Lights, and we can bring down the lights and take a look at it.
Probably shouldn't even mention this, but a few times it seems as if the shadows are following me. I have to confess, I'm a little uneasy. I really feel the isolation now that it's dark. I think it's better that I keep busy. Time to try out the fan optoscope. I'm excited. This will be its first real test. I am seeing ghosts. This place is full of them. They are the shadows of the men who served here for all those decades. They don't see me, whatever they are.
I want you.
It's coming from the river.
I hope you won't have any nightmares over Ernie tonight. So I want to just sort of finish up and talk a little bit about a different storytelling, a different way of looking at and being on assignment, as it were, here in Groton, and that is writing. I have written historical fiction novels, 4 of them, and in some ways they're easier than writing the media shows I did. These were non-narrated shows I showed you, but when you're trying to do the life of Napoleon in 8 minutes, or the story of the Titanic in 15, or world environment in 20, the sort of shows I did for Geographic, and they were narrated, that's very hard to condense those big topics into 5 or 6 pages of text. A novel, I found I had no parameters. I had no stopwatch in my hand, so I could let loose and just tell a story the way I wanted to and let it unfold and develop the characters. So I've written 4, and they all in their way have a connection to our area. And when you write a novel, you have the 3 pillars that come to bear on your creative process. The experience, you draw on your personal experiences in life. You do research, especially if it's historical and historical fiction. You need to know some of the context of what you're writing about, and imagination. And you put all those 3 together and you come up with a story that's part real and part imaginary, part fictional. And the first one I wrote, and there's a long story about writing it, actually spanned from the time I was in college to about 2011, like 40 years or so. And I had other things to do in life besides finish the book, but I stuck with it and finally finished it. So Legacy of the Light, as you saw, I'd been out to Race Rock a few times to do various things involved with our lighthouse work, so I'd be able to roam around it and see what it looked inside. And I used the pictures and those experiences to help me craft the stage, as it were, of the action of the novel. And I talked about research. It takes place, a lot of it, in the day of the hurricane of 1938. So I was able to find plenty of research about that. I went to the archives in Washington, D.C., where all the logbooks from all the lighthouses for all the years are kept. And I got the one from Race Rock that included 1938, September of 1938, so I could look through and see what the keeper was writing. And this is the page from that time, a little water-stained. He didn't have a lot to say, sort of doing the daily routine, The biggest hurricane ever hits and, trashes the place, and it's like, yeah, I got to clean up the mess. So anyhow, it was interesting to be able to see that and other things to do with it. And the book basically takes place, most of it, in 1938. It's about 2 generations of lighthouse keepers, a father and a son. The son is in the 1938 part. And he and his fiancée and a mysterious stranger get trapped out there the day of the hurricane, and the mystery and the drama unfolds. So that was how Legacy of the Light came into being. In the Shadow of the Light, have you seen, Marcia and I had a fair amount of involvement with Ledge Light. I know it better than my own home. We spent a lot of time out there. We created the whole Ernie thing. We were steeped in that. And as I said, that strange, weird, creepy trailer you saw as part of that film was helped to promote the book and to bring it to life. And as I said, the button and handprints and other things on the wall, if you went out there, they're in the book, and you can see them at the lighthouse. It's nice to have control of a place where you can do what you want with it. So if we wanted to put a bloody handprint on the wall, I just did it. Ledge Light, we had a lot to do with, as I said, and real experience, lots of research, and that's how In the Shadow of the Light came into being. It did not take 40 years to do. So what does Magician's Choice have to do with New London? Well, when I was about 12, my mother gave me that camera I showed you, but she also gave me a magic set. And like many non-athletic boys, I found magic to be quite fascinating. Many kids take it up for a year or so and drop it. I still do it. I've done it around town and a little bit professionally. Here's a picture of me as about 12 years old. That's a publicity shot for shows I never gave, but I was ready with publicity should the opportunity happen. Actually, I gave one for Chelsea's 7th birthday party. My goddaughter's here, so I've done it, but I did it a little professionally. Marcia and I actually did magic shows for National Geographic for their sales department around the country. I'm the only magician National Geographic has ever had. So we did a show, we toured around the country, and we did that. And here we're doing one at my dad's 100th birthday party. We also collect magic posters and memorabilia, and here's the great Harry Blackstone. So likewise, for magic, I had the personal experience of having done magic shows, collecting stuff, going to conventions, meeting magicians, and really kind of, it's been a lifelong hobby and an occasional semi-professional thing. So I wanted to write an homage to the various crazy people who are involved in magic. And it's basically a coming-of-age story about a boy from, here's the connection, New London, who goes to the Garden Theater on his 13th birthday, sees Harry Blackstone, who gives him a magic set, and then the kid he grows up and he goes through World War II and a carnival in the South, and he tries to break into the world of professional magic, not Harry Potter, but real magic like vaudeville and the theaters of New York as he grows up and his adventures in that world. And it comes full circle and ends up with a performance at the Guard. So it's very much in the Dutch Tavern. All sorts of local places are involved in Magician's Choice. So it's definitely got a local connection. And that brings us to Elephant Island, Antarctica. What's the connection there? Well, we do have a lot of connections here with whaling and Palmer from Stonington. There's Palmer Land down there, who's the first North American to set foot in Antarctica. And I did a project, a documentary for National Geographic about Sir Ernest Shackleton, and if you know his story, his amazing adventures going to Antarctica, getting stranded there with his men in the ice, and had a winter over. There was no hope of rescue, so he took this little boat, very little boat, 22-foot boat, and they sailed at 800 miles to Elephant Island to try to live there. No, I'm sorry, he was on Elephant Island. They sailed it to South Georgia to try to get rescue, and they found a whaling station, and in fact, he did rescue all of his 28 men from Elephant Island, which is this little speck in the middle of nowhere in the Antarctic Ocean area there. It's a forbidding place. It was a horrible place for them to live. When you go to Antarctica, and Marcia and I went there first in 2010 on a trip, you go to Sir Ernest Shackleton's grave, and you have a little whiskey in his honor, and that's his grave on South Georgia on the way to the peninsula of Antarctica. And then I started to do these Lindblad National Geographic expeditions to Antarctica. So I've been back there 4 times, and I love it. It's one of my favorite places on the planet. It's just going to another planet when you go there. And here Marcia and I are holding up the flag in front of the explorer ship that I teach photography on and lecture. And if you go to Shackleton's grave on South Georgia, it's this little graveyard, maybe 30 or 40 graves, kind of in the middle of nowhere. That's Shackleton's grave. And as we were wandering around, I noticed this little marker on this gravestone. I went up to it, and hopefully you can see, it was a guy from New London, buried on the bottom of the world. And fate, I thought this has to be a story. So I had Mystic Seaport look for H. Brockleway, and they couldn't find him on any manifest. Now that doesn't mean he didn't go there, but you know, records were not precise and things get lost, so who knows, it was a dead end, but that didn't stop me. I thought, okay, he's from New London, I can make a story out of this, so I did. And I created his descendants and a whole story about a modern day expedition that goes back to Elephant Island. My research included some interesting things about iridium, and Tesla figured into it. I stayed in his room in the New York hotel, part of my research. And I went to the Museum of Natural History, and meteorites got to be part of the story because in my thinking, gee, maybe they found something on Elephant Island that is a mystery and caused some of them to go back later. Why would you go back to this hellhole? But they did. So I crafted this whole story about Elephant Island, that maybe there was a meteorite hidden in a cave in its deep, dark, cold heart of Elephant Island, which I was lucky enough to go by on one of the expeditions. I was unable to land there, but I got a close-up view of it, and the captain of the ship, with a twinkle in her eye, said, I'll bring you close to the source of your book here. And she helped me get close enough to get a feel for it. So that's how Elephant Island came into being. And you know, all 4 books, therefore, have some connection quite literally to the lighthouses here, maybe a little bit more peripherally to people from New London who have adventures of various sorts. I do have some copies here, which I'd be happy to sell and sign for you after the talk. And that's my story, basically. It started with a kid going out in his neighborhood and shooting a fire one day when he was, 14 years old or so, and then documenting the New London train station as a college project, coming back here to do shows for various institutions like the Monte Cristo Cottage and the O'Neill and the Lyman Allen Museum, and then traveling the world for almost 40 years now for National Geographic, seeing the world, and then kind of finding one of the most wonderful assignments right here in Groton. So it's been an interesting journey. It's not over yet. And all I can say is that it's kind of a cliche, but for all of that, all the years and all the traveling, I've discovered, like Dorothy, that there's no place like home. And for a kid who grew up across the river and really didn't know anything about Groton growing up, I've also discovered that, in fact, there's really no place like Groton. So I appreciate your attention. If you want to see these shows that you've seen and more, lots more about all sorts of things, photography and magic and the books and places all over the world, you can go to my website. There's a films page, there's a geographic page, there's a books page, whatever, and roam around there and explore as you will. It connects you to YouTube where a lot of these films are, and there's usually a little blurb that explains what they're all about, some from Geographic, some from train stations and bits and pieces of my career, and I found some up in the attic the other day, so I'm going to add those in. I found a file of things Geographic sent me digitized, so I'll keep adding to it. So all that said, I appreciate your attention, and thanks again.